Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the second episode of the Horus Heresy. Now, today we're going to be tackling Book 3, which is Galaxy in Flames. Now, Galaxy in Flames is an interesting one because it's a pivotal moment in this series. The first two books, Horus Rising and False Gods, are set up. Essentially, they do have their own plots and their own little sub-narratives going on, but they're not really plot-heavy. What they are is they're establishing the status quo. They're establishing this new set of parameters that this universe is operating under, and also the new stuff, the stuff that contradicts everything that's gone before. They are establishing the new characters like Loken and whatnot, and Saul Tarvitz, all of those guys. This book is very interesting because this is where it all coalesces, and it's from this book that all the various different threads of the other Horus Heresy books stem from. This book deals with the drop site massacres of Istvan III, the virus bombing of Istvan III. Most people know this section of the Horus Heresy because it's spoken about quite a lot. That said, it's only ever been glossed over before. It's never really been explored in great detail. What happens is that Horus and the legions that originally turn with him, so the Emperor's Children, the Death Guard, the World Eaters, and the Word Bearers coalesce. No, not the Word Bearers. The Word Bearers aren't there yet. They turn up later. They turn up at Istvan V, which is slightly later. What happens is they materialize in the Istvan system, where there has been an uprising, and they're there with Imperial authority, although the heresy has been boiling away in secret for a long, long time at this point. They're there with Imperial authority. They're sent there to quell the uprising. And Horus chooses to do so by unleashing the Life Eater virus. So torpedoes that unleash a virus that eats every molecule of organic matter on that planet and turns it into a raging fireball where nothing can live. However, what is also happening here, the traitor legions as they currently stand are enacting a purge of their own ranks, of those that they aren't sure are going to turn. It's really interesting. There is this bizarre state of politics set up. The book is, once again, from the perspective of Garviel Loken, and some other characters too, but it also sets up the beginnings of what's happening amongst these other legions. So you do get introduced to characters like Saul Tarvitz, like Nathaniel Garrow, like Khan the Betrayer. Khan is here too. And what's really bizarre is they don't know. Despite the fact that the heresy has been boiling away in secret for quite a while now, and quite a big chunk of their legions have turned, they don't know what's happening. There has been this conspiratorial attempt to keep from the wider legion what is happening here. Just in the interests of maintaining a degree of cohesion, so they don't have to do away with necessary warriors and supplies, and so there's no internecine fighting. And the reason it goes on for so long without being noticed, part of the reason is you have to understand what it's like for a space marine at this point. It is inconceivable to them that they could be betrayed by their brothers. At this point, the notion that a space marine could slay another space marine is inconceivable. It's like a kind of bizarre blasphemy. When Loken describes it, it's almost like he has a fit. He can't quite grasp that this is what's happening. Most of them can't. Although some of the older ones have certainly noticed something. They've noticed something strange. All of them have noticed something going on in the characters of their legions. And it takes a long time for them to accept it. Even worse is the notion that their Primarchs could betray them. That is insane, because to the Space Marines, the Primarchs are beyond saintly. They're demigods. They are avatars of perfection itself. So the notion that they could betray them, their own sons, is inconceivable. That they could be imperfect, that there could be something wrong with them, is insane. And the book goes to great depths to explore this, particularly with regards to Saul Tarvitz, who is the Emperor's Children. He's an Emperor's Children officer who is actually very loyal. He's very loyal to the Emperor, and ends up being one of those ones who is sent down to Istvan III to be virus bombed, essentially. It is so strange. It's really good fun, actually. It's a really good way of getting deeper under the psychology of a space marine and of this wider universe when it's exploring what's going on in their heads as they realize that their brothers have betrayed them, as they realize that they've been betrayed by their fathers, by the Primarchs themselves. And as a result, they do get sent down to the surface of Istvan 3. They don't know it's going to be virus bomb. They think they're going down to enforce the Emperor's will, to bring it back in line. And of course they find that isn't the case. They end up being virus bombed. The entire planet goes up in a ball of flame, but it's not enough. They do find bunkers, and as a result they survive. So Horus declares the heresy at this point. He can't conceal this because the death of every person on Istvan 3 echoes throughout the warp, and the astropaths and whatnot hear it. They realise what's gone on, and he intends this. I mean, this is a declaration of Horus's rebellion. This is where it happens. So suddenly the Emperor knows, everybody knows, and it's suddenly a big thing. Suddenly the rebellion is in full swing, essentially. The rebellion is in absolute full swing. But unbeknownst to Horus, some of his sons have survived. Some of the sons that he wanted to get rid of have survived. There are still quite significant forces of Space Marines left on the planet below. And there are still some loyalists amongst the fleet as well. There's the like of Nathaniel Garrow amongst the Death Guard and his lot. They are still aboard their ships. So suddenly, from the very beginning, plans are going awry for Horus. So what he has to do, and he very much regrets it, Angron kind of acts against him and just takes to the field. Angron and the World Eaters just descend on Istvan 3 and start fighting with their former brothers. It's the first time that you've had like Space Marine slaying Space Marine on that scale since ever. They've fought before. They've definitely fought before, but it's never been like this where they are trying to annihilate one another. It's really fascinating, and as a result, Horus has no choice but to commit his own forces to the field, and you get these wars between the former sons of Horus and the current sons of Horus, the ones that are loyal to the War Master and not to the Emperor. It's fascinating. You actually get to see a lot more of Abaddon at this point, because Abaddon's a different character here. He's younger, and he's full of beans, is Abaddon. He's very angry, he's very vicious, pathologically loyal to Horus. He's like, he is like a true believer, Abaddon, at this point. He is a fanatic. He's a zealot at this point, to the point whereby he shames the word bearers for his faith in his Primarch. He will do anything Horus says. He will emulate him to the nth degree. There's a very good fight between Abaddon and Garviel Loken on the surface of Istvan 3 amongst the ruins, in which it seems there is a very definite outcome. But later on you'll discover that the outcome perhaps isn't quite so clear as that. It's very interesting. I'll say that. It is very interesting. But what this book really does is it starts the real action of the heresy. This is where it starts to really ramp up, where you get the big Space Marine on Space Marine battles and wars, and where you start to see the internal politics fracturing between the legions. It's really fascinating. But you also start to see the doubt. Horus, when Angron takes to the field, Horus is absolutely furious because he realizes that controlling these guys is going to be really hard. Coordinating these guys is going to be a real problem, especially Angron, who just does whatever the hell he likes, wherever the butcher's nails lead him, essentially. But what I love about this as well is you get established characters introduced who, again, are really surprising. Khan the Betrayer turns up here. Angron turns up for the first time here. And Angron isn't really surprising at this point, although he does become surprising later on. But Khan is not who you think he would be. Khan, you would expect to be amongst the loyalists on Istvan, because he is so calm, so considered, and Garviel gets on really well with him. He's one of the only... He acts as a sort of ambassador for the World Eaters, and he's the only one who can talk sense to Angron, who can sort of calm him down, because Angron is a loon. Angron is a total, utter lunatic in this book. It is wonderful. It really is interesting. But by the end, you get to see the other kind of betrayer, because a lot of stuff has been done to him by that point, and he's experienced a lot of stuff too. So you start to see the real kind of betrayer coming up. Really cool. Really cool. There's a lot of stuff involving Erebus. You get to see the machinations of Lorgar and the Word Bearers, and you get introduced to these characters here a bit more fully, which sets up the stuff that Aaron Dembski Bowden later writes in the wonderful First Heretic. In terms of like the ethos of the book, it's not quite as strong as the previous two. The previous two had very definite focus on the Sons of Horus and on very definite characters, and because they were establishing this universe, they had a lot more to work with. They had a lot more meat, whereas this one is a lot more plot heavy. It's a lot more plot heavy, and it has a lot more going on. It has a lot more detail in terms of action being taken as a result of what goes on in the previous two books. In many respects, you can read the first three books as one very, very, very long novel. It does work in that regard. It doesn't have the same surprises as the previous two books, because of course it doesn't. The previous two books are trying to establish the new parameters of the universe, whereas this one isn't. It assumes they are established, and it just runs with it. It just goes for it. It's very good. You also get in this book a lot more of the human characters, and you start to get the beginnings of what will eventually, in millennia to come, become things like the Ecclesiarchy, things like the Grey Knights, things like the Assassins. You can actually see where they begin here. You start to get, for example, manifestations of holy power. You get characters who are like saintly human beings, normal human beings, who for whatever reason start to develop connections to maybe the Warp, maybe to the Emperor. It's hard to say. And they start to develop capabilities, like psychic capabilities. It's where you start to get miracles occurring in the name of the Emperor, and people starting to worship these characters. You get the beginning of the Imperial Creed here, which was verboten before, of course. It's fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. It's a good book. It's very well written. It's very pulpy. It's even more pulpy than the previous one, so it's easy to pick up and read. Lots of action. Very big. The scale that happens here is enormous. It's absolutely enormous, because of course you have like entire planets being desolated. You have multiple space marine fleets that are gathered together in their entireties. 5 whole legions here. Absolute insanity. Lots of Primarchs, lots of familiar characters and unfamiliar characters. It's well worth a look. It's very, very good. Now, from here, really, we don't have to follow the heresy in order. You can actually branch off from this point down various different plot lines. You could go and read Mechanicum after this, and that would be fine. You could go and read Fulgrim after this, and that would be fine. You could go and read quite a few of them, but we're going to go in chronological order. We're going to go and in order of publication. So next we'll look at book 4, which actually shifts focus from the Sons of Horus to the Death Guard and follows Nathaniel Garrow, who is set up in this book but is really fleshed out in the next one. And actually he becomes one of the key players alongside Garviel Loken in this entire series. Nathaniel Garrow is a really cool character. He's a Death Guard, loyal to Mortarion, but ultimately a good man. He does turn on his Primarch as much as it hurts him. He becomes one of the few loyalist Death Guard to break away from the fleet and to return to Terra. And he becomes, later on, he sort of becomes the proto-Grey Knight. He's kind of the first of the Grey Knights. Really cool, eh? So, when we come back, also in the next book, you get the introduction of the very specific Nurgle stuff, which is very cool. So, when next we come back, ladies and gents, the last flight of the Eisenstein. Until then, bye-bye!